I'm Carrie.
I'm Toni, and we are.
Two cranky creatives.
This podcast is brought to you by the Graphics Gang, our online community you can find at patreon.com/graphics gang. Paid members can also watch many of the unedited podcast video recordings. So what are we cranky about today, Mable?
I am really cranky about rejection.
Ooh, the evil word, rejection. I hate it.
Yes, and me too. Very, very cranky. It drives me crazy.
So we're definitely going to talk about that today. But let's get all the introductions done. So Mable, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and our listeners, who you are and like how you came to be in this surface design world?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mable, and I'm based in Melbourne, in Australia, if you can't tell by my accent already. And I'm a surface designer, and I kind of fell into it in maybe 2018, I'd say. It was, I guess, purely by accident. But when I actually, I took a course and I learned more about it, that was when I had the goosebumps and like I felt that this was for me. This is what I'm on earth for. And I just loved every single moment of being a surface designer. But before this, I was actually a fine art photographer. And before that, in my past life, I was a journalist and a stylist. So I've been through quite a few creative careers now, but this has given me the most joy and purpose.
Awesome. And in fact, I think it was your writing background that is how I came to be with you. I feel like I first learned about you through somewhere in a course I took. You were a bonus, and it was storytelling in pattern design, I think is what it was, and that's how I first learned about you. And you had mentioned your writing background, and so I was a writer before I was an artist, and I was like, oh, a kindred spirit. So yeah. That was awesome. All right, so who wants to kick off with the ugly stories of rejection?
Well, I would love to start us off and lead into this subject of rejection by saying that, Mable, I discovered you a few years ago. And when I discovered you, I think I found you on Instagram and instantly fell in love with your art, and then realized, oh my gosh, she teaches classes and, she speaks and stuff. So of course I just started following you and watching classes and stuff with you. But you said something a few years ago that changed my life. And it's not what you would expect. You would expect me to say, you changed my life because you told me to always keep trying or whatever. But what you said was, I have been ghosted by art directors. And the thing is that I respect you so much and I admire you. And I know you're obviously very talented and you are successful with art licensing. But hearing you say that changed my life because it made me realize that I wasn't alone. When I was getting rejections from art directors that I was pitching for art licensing, for instance, I really felt like it was just me. And I thought there's no way these people that I admire are getting, rejected and ghosted. And when you said that, first of all, I immediately fell in love with you and said, I'm going to follow her forever because she's real and honest. But also it made me feel like, I can do this. It's surprising that saying something negative actually made me feel really positive, but it did. So I just want to thank you for being honest about that and sharing the reality that, yes, being ghosted by and rejected by art directors or, being rejected in other situations as an artist is really common. So thank you.
Yeah. You're most welcome. And that's why I feel that there's so much value in this podcast because, a lot of us want to believe in our dream. I want to believe in my dream to be a successful surface designer. That was what drove me for the first couple of years. But, when I guess the reality hits when you start pitching and putting your work out there, and then you get rejected or you get ghosted and all those things that you didn't expect the industry to be, it can be really, it hits you in the guts, right? It takes a toll on your confidence.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what I've learned over the years is, it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
You're gonna get rejected and ghosted a lot. And to be honest, I used to tell people not to take it personally, but the truth is, I do take it very personally. And in fact, I think this 2023 and 2024 is probably my quietest year, as in not pitching or coming up with art, because I got so burned out by rejections. Not just to the level of when you're pitching, but you sign a contract with a company and the rejection can still happen. I'm
Yes.
just gonna be real here, but rejection can still happen after you sign a contract with a company. And it's happened twice with
Oh, wow.
two companies that I really, really love and really wanted to work with. And it just bumped me out. Okay.
It hurts. Yeah. I know.
Got a
And
washing
you
machine in
think-
the background, so I'm sorry if that's
Oh, that's
actually
okay. My dogs are
going
wandering
up.
around.
yeah.
You know,
That's
we
part
don't
of us being
pretend that
real
this
here.
is a professionally polished anything.
Yeah.
On top of that, I'm a professional mom. I have chores. I have a huge load of laundry on my, laundry room. So I'm grumpy about that too.
That's okay. But
So-
yeah, no, I mean, you think that like once you sign a contract or once you sign with an agent, you're not going to get ghosted or they're going to be really responsive. And it's just, it's not easy and it happens. And yeah.
Yeah. And I think we should take a few minutes to talk about like why we as artists, and when I use that term, I'm using it loosely, any creative person experiences rejection as deeply as we do, right? Because, I've heard all like the sales stuff, like getting to yes and for, no is just not yet and all that other stuff. But I think for me, and Carrie, I've said this before, I don't remember which episode I said it in, but the act of creation, however it's an act of courage and you're putting some piece of yourself into that thing. You know what I'm saying? And so especially with art, so like two things I'm deeply personal about are my poetry and my art, right? Like my prose is much more cerebral. So like when people have something to say about it, I'm just kind of like, fuck you, I don't care. But like my poetry, if somebody doesn't like my poetry, I feel like wounded at the soul level. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And somebody doesn't like my art, I really have to like work my way around being hurt by it.
Yeah.
Because even though, the ultimate end of our industry is commercial, it's still our creation, right? It's still our art. It's still deeply personal at some level. And anytime somebody's saying no to that, it can be difficult to separate that from that we ourselves as a human being are being somehow rejected, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important that from that framework, we understand why it might hit differently, right?
Yeah.
In this context.
Yeah, I always tell people that pitching your work is a lot like dating. Like, on what people do on Tinder, you swipe it. And it's so easy to put yourself, actually, it's really hard to put yourself out there. But it's a bit of like a dating game. You've got to see who matches up with you and stuff like that. And like any dating game, I mean, I haven't been in the scene for a while, but it hurts to be rejected.
Yeah.
You think that, I'm really excited about this person / company. And then, everything seems to be going really well. And then, the rejection happens on that level. It hurts a lot more than being rejected at the start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're already committed to the process. You already signed the damn contract. And then, they'll tell you like, you're not right for us, or something or other, the color's not right, whatever it is, something is not right. It makes you feel, oh damn, I'm not talented enough. Like that sort of, I tell myself I have to be positive, but when you push yourself to be positive and you don't feel positive, I call that toxic positivity.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because then you feel
100%.
bad that you don't feel positive, which is like it's even worse.
Yeah.
I
Feel
love
your
that.
feelings, people.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true though. That's a really insightful way to put it. Toxic
So
positivity.
yeah, I've been actually a little quiet this year because I really felt like I needed to lick my wounds and just kind of get my head around things for a little bit, because like at the start, when you're naive and you're hopeful and you're full of dreams, that's kind of your fuel. But once you hit a certain level and you're more experienced and you've got your stuff out there, and like the success does get to your head. There's no such thing as success in our field, because it's a constant start over. Once that project finished, you're back to ground zero.
Yep.
Like, you get licensed doesn't mean like you're successful for life.
Yeah,
right.
I license to Target, I still get rejected and I still get ghosted. So it's an instant start over. And I think the word success, it does play the ego a little bit. And I've learned to be a lot more humble since.
Yeah.
And I think too, as artists, I like the fact that you said you kind of took a step back and needed to like heal. You know what I'm saying? Because no matter how much you do kind of like try to get yourself back out there and keep going, I think we do need to give ourselves permission to take a break. And I have a question for you, Mable. In America, here in the United States, we have this hustle grind culture, right? And it's like so toxic. Is it like, does the same thing exist in Australia for you guys?
It's a lot more relaxed in Australia, and I have noticed that. Like, this year was the first year I went to America, and I noticed that sort of philosophy a lot. And people aren't allowed to take breaks. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is our human right.
Yeah.
That was the first time I was aware of that whole hustle behavior. But let me tell you this: I am Asian. BBT is all about hustle, and I'm like, this is bullshit. And I hear my mom's voice a lot in my head, even though she's passed on for more than 10 years. But she's all about the hustle, man. And she's all about perfection and being on top of things. And I am not on top of things a lot of the days. I am not organized. I have no idea what I'm doing 100% of the time. So it's I think it's a universal thing, this hustle thing. But I've learned to be anti-hustle. I learned that is not healthy for my mental health, to just keep pushing my foot to the pedal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it hurts to take a step back, because I was all about pushing myself all the way through at the start. And then, having not, the income for this year as I used to have, it's made me really think about what I want my next step to be. How do I want to serve with value rather than driven by monetary? Like, I've achieved that. Like, at the start, I think I like to put this out there. It's not unhealthy to work for money, because when I started out, I had no savings. I was really broke. I had no income coming in as a full-time mom. And I really wanted to contribute to the household. I didn't want to depend 100% on my husband. So that was my motivation at the start. And I've achieved that. I have income. I am contributing. I'm a lot happier in that sense. But it's not it's not something that fulfills you long term.
Yeah.
Short-term goal, that's great. If you need to put food on the table, money to pay the bills.
Right.
That's entirely okay, to work for the money. But I'm just saying that in a long-term, long run or a marathon, like this is a marathon, it is not sustainable.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You definitely burn out. And doing a lot of pitching and just pitching, like, if I notice I'll go through periods where I'm not creating art and I'm just pitching, and that is soul sucking. I mean, it just kills me, and then I just feel exhausted. And then when I get rejections or ghosted or just no response after that, then I feel even worse. So I try to balance it now, where I'm like, I have got to stop. I only do the pitching every so often. And I take time, for myself, but I even make sure I take time to do the creative part, which is the reason I got into doing this.
Yeah.
And the drawing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I had to make a conscious effort to do that though.
Yeah. And, I've done the same thing even with design contests. Like, going into 2025, I'm taking a real hard look at how many and where I want to spend my time with design contests, because they're their own form. They're a very unique form of rejection, I think.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Especially the public ones where, part of the submission is you got to post it on Instagram and you got a hashtag and all this other stuff, and like, I
The
mean,
popularity contest.
right. And I have made the determination that if part of winning involves the public voting, I want nothing to do with that contest.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to do with that contest. And I just won't do it anymore. But I think what I've struggled with those is like, and maybe this is arrogance on my part, but there are times when I look at the top 10 and I'm like, that is not better than what I submitted.
Yeah.
From a purely technical standpoint, that is not better. And maybe it's just like, maybe it's just my ego, but to the point of the brand, I'll credit where credit is due. That's what the people apparently wanted because that's what got voted into the top 10.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, but like, it drives me like so bonkers that I'm just like, you know what? I have to take a step back because it makes me question who I am as an artist.
Yeah.
And like, it's funny because I have an MFA, but my MFA is in creative writing. And I told a friend, like, I was having coffee with this person. They were like talking about, they were thinking about going to my university, to the program that I was in. And I was like, are you confident in your ability as a writer? And she was like, yes. I was like, then don't get an MFA. I have never questioned myself more deeply than when I got my MFA and wondered, could I even string 2 words together about 3/4 of the way through that program? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, be very, very careful where you are mentally and how you're. And I think that we have a message in this industry about what you have to be doing to get seen. And I think everybody gets to make those choices for themselves, and nobody's encouraging that. And that's half the reason where like this podcast came from. Carrie and I got so sick of, like the dream weavers, I'm just going to call them, with nobody talking about this aspect of the industry.
Yeah.
I am a little bit of both. Okay, but before that, I wanted to say something about the whole competition and stuff like that. I am a very competitive person, but I also know that I'm not gonna put myself out there into a competitive arena because if I don't win, I'm just gonna like beat myself up a lot. And I will be a very cynical person and start judging others, and I don't like that person. And so that's why I intentionally don't put myself in that situation. And I am always comparing my work to other artists, and it's a very unhealthy trait. I know that. And so I always have to remind myself that it's a self-competition, as in, am I pushing myself a little bit more today than yesterday? But at the same time, acknowledge that if today all I feel like doing is sitting in front of TV and watching Korean drama and having instant noodles, so be it. That is,
Yes.
Balance is really all about, you knowing where your limit is and what you don't like, who you don't like being. And I don't like being cynical and as much as I'm grumpy and cranky about a lot of things in the world, I really try my best to look at the beauty of things.
Yeah.
And which is why I'm a surface designer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I love that because like, with pitching, for instance, or, just trying to get my art out there and trying to make money on it, I can get really cynical too, like, with who, if I'm pitching someone, I'm like, well, I can't believe you're not that I'm being arrogant, but I'm like, I know this is the right fit for you. And I get really frustrated, but instead I turn that around into something more positive. Like, you know what? It probably may, or maybe isn't me. It may be them. Maybe they're full, maybe, and even if I'm not the right fit, I try not to take it personally. You were talking about, not taking things personally earlier. I take things personally too.
Mhm.
I think we all do. But my way of handling it now is I just let myself be frustrated. Now I kind of get more mad than I do sad. And sometimes that turns into me doing more research on the company and finding another person to pitch. But sometimes it just means I'm going to feel my feelings. I'm going to let it be okay that I'm feeling that and then move on to the next thing. Because it's not worth, I'm not going to let other people define how I feel about myself as an artist.
Yeah. And I think it's important. Like, how are you balancing? Like, how are you feeding your creative spirit? You know what I'm saying? Because rejection, unfortunately, is part of this industry. And rejection is so subjective, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, I was a writer before this. So the stories that I hold for myself are Harry Potter only got published because a 9-year-old liked it and asked her dad to do it, right? So like, this woman's a billionaire now, but somebody's 9-year-old daughter saw it, read it, and said, Dad, can you please publish it? And so he did a limited run just to make his daughter happy, right?
Yeah.
That's how Harry Potter got published. And then a book which I read and love and advocate for everybody to read, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, was rejected 120 times.
Yeah.
Okay? Like, this is a New York Times bestseller for like decades.
Yeah.
Right? 120 rejections.
Yeah.
And so like when you think about that, and I don't know that we have any of those kind of like killer stories in our industry, because nobody's out there like, hey, I got rejected today. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, you could say that, the great artists, look at all the famous artists like Picasso and, who were penniless while they were alive.
True.
I mean, I feel like more art gets and has always gotten rejected than is accepted.
Yeah.
So that's because art is like, you might not like circles. So you're going to say no to art with circles in it. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, that's how ridiculous it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love though, like, I don't know, maybe I'll do this if I ever decide to start pitching again, because maybe I've also taken off from pitching for a little while. So when you sign up for immersion, which I did immersion earlier this year, Bonnie has this wall behind her, right, that she films periodically, and it's the name of everybody who signed up for the course, right? Somebody, and maybe I'll do it, I don't know, it did take a lot of balls for me to do it, but like every rejection I get, I should go on a wall.
Yeah.
And then like have this wallpaper and then like film it until finally, and like do it with like the same design or something, I don't know, find a way to make it like the journey of a single pattern,
Yeah.
So yeah.
So in speaking about, rejection or getting ghosted, I kind of shared like, what I do to, I guess, not take it as personally, or to how to handle it. Like, what do you feel like does work for you if you experience, for instance, getting ghosted? Like, you don't have to share details. I know you probably don't want to divulge any, sensitive information, but like, if you sign a deal with a company and you're like, okay, we're a go now, we're good. And then all of a sudden you don't hear back. Like, how in your own, head did you end up handling that? Because you're here talking to us and, you have a smile on your face and you seem positive. So you must have found something that worked.
But I'll tell you what happened with those two instances. I won't tell you what company it is. So in the two cases that the rejection happened, the first one was with a fabric company that I really want to work with. And she saw what I posted on Instagram, and then she emailed me. And she liked the design and the colors and everything. But as we progressed to, we signed the contract and she was going to release the collection. She wanted the colors changed, which is completely normal. That's what our directors want. But the color changed to the point that it was so bad. Like, personally, I could not, it would not sit well myself if this was released in the world. I would be ashamed of the colors. And actually, I rejected her in the end, saying that, look, I can't let this collection out in those colors because it would not sit well with me. It wouldn't destroy me, but I would be very ashamed of this action. And it took a lot of courage for me to say that, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people will go, let's just do it because this is a company I want to work with, blah, blah. And I get that. But to me, like everyone else, what we put out in the world and onto products is very personal to us. And our name is going to be on that product or that, fabric collection. And I don't want to feel ashamed. I don't,
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to feel bad about my own work. So, every time I come up with a color coordination or a change of the colors, she would reject that. And she would say, no, we want that. In the end, she wanted it to be in black and white. And I'm like, what is the point of this? My work is not black and white.
Right.
Yeah, your work
So-
is really bright and colorful.
Yeah.
And I recognize your work from a distance, very easily, not just because of your style, but because of your colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of
Yeah,
your
so
signature for sure.
It
Yeah.
did not, personally sit well with me. So I had to pull the plug on that. So that's case number one. And then case number two was a company for coloring book. And it was a very vague brief. And she said I could do whatever I wanted.
Ooh.
When I did come up with the whole, page book for it, she's like, no this, no that, no. And it's like, she completely like, this is my month work. And it's like, if you didn't want these things, it should have been in the brief, not when I finished that, and taken so much of my time. I mean, having said that, it is commission work. There's a lot of reworking, and that's why I hate commission work, because it's just really hard. People
Yeah.
just changes all the time. And so that was the rejection on a lot of things, because there was this freedom of creativity that they promised. But in the end, it was like, oh, and I can't do whatever I want because you just rejected a whole bunch of stuff. I'm like, screw that.
Yeah.
So I put the plug on that project as well. And and that's where I went into deep depression. I go, oh, this sucks.
Yeah. I mean, that would be really, really gut wrenching, because you get your hopes up. It's
Mhm.
worse than, when you just don't hear back from the company, or the company, goes to before you start creating the art. It's like you've invested your soul into this, your time, your valuable time. Yeah.
I'm
That's
curious, and this might get us into too much of a tangent, so we don't have to go down this path, but I am curious. So like when I do freelance work, I have kill language in my contracts, right? So they have to pay me up to the point where we end the contract. If for whatever reason we negate the contract before final delivery. My licensing, I haven't experienced it with my licensing contract, so I'm wondering, like, what kind of kill language is, like, do you get paid or are you just out?
I don't have a kill fee. I have mentioned this to other artists that they should have a kill fee, but I didn't put up on a kill fee, and I don't really. Yeah, I should put that in my contract, but I don't. Because I always thought, well, this will never happen to me, but it's happened in a couple of years. So I need to revise this whole contract thing. One of the companies did say that they would pay me for all the effort that I've done, but having to pursue a company for your kill fee, it's also another level of how do I say courage, right? It's gonna take a lot of time,
Yeah.
energy to pursue that, and I'm like, this is not worth it. This is just so. Like, I'm already in pain. I'm already like on the floor, gushing blood, and I'm like,
Right.
do I have to do this as well? I'm like, I would rather vomit than do this.
It's like being kicked when you're down,
Yes,
It's
Right.
like,
You didn't want me and you're
Yes.
not paying me?
yeah.
yeah.
For real,
So
yeah.
I didn't want to pursue that. That was it's another thing. Like it's another thing. Like when people steal your work and then you have to legally pursue that. Do I
Yeah.
really want to go through that? I mean, yes, to a certain level, it depends on who steals your work. But it's so much. At that point, I have no more strength left. Like I
Yeah.
like I said, falling on the floor. You need to have a lot of energy and strength and guts to actually through the path. And I didn't have that capacity this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
that's
wanna
okay.
applaud
I
you.
mean, not everyone does. I mean, like I said, I get mad. I think I'm just really mad all the time, or I get mad really easily. So for me, I will fight over like ridiculous things with all kinds of companies, not even art related, on principle. I will fight over like $1 on principle because I get so mad. And maybe that's not healthy, but I also find it kind of fun because it's like a puzzle, like I'm going to win. But, in the end, I mean, as I've gotten older, I've had to let go of a little of that because that is not, and it drives everyone around me crazy too.
I
I
am
think
like that. Like was a very angry person. I think after having my son, I've just lost the battle.
Yeah. Well, and you realize there's more important things in life, obviously.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Do I want to fight this? No, I don't have the energy today.
Yeah.
I think
Very
there's absolutely nothing wrong with knowing what battles you're willing to fight there, right? And I think we all have our lines in the sand. And so for me, I know where I'm willing to fight and where I'm not. I have kill language. Fortunately, I've never had to enact it because, I haven't gone down that path. But like, I make them sign that section of the contract.
Yeah.
Like you have to initial that. Like you see what happens if you cancel this contract.
I'm gonna take that, Toni.
I often with client work will require a 50% payment up front.
Oh, absolutely.
And that way, like by the time I'm at 50% of the project, if they haven't rejected it, then we have a problem.
Deposit up front. I call it my retainer fee because I'm not taking other clients because I got to take on you.
Yeah.
And I have milestone payments as well. So by the time we get to that final payment, they've probably paid me 75% of what they owe me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the art licensing contracts that I've run into, typically the ones that I sign are provided by the company because I really don't have a choice. I have an attorney, but it's like if they provide it, that's their standard contract. So I either sign it or I don't. And I know it doesn't have kill language, but a lot of the licensing work that I do is speculative. So I don't, it may not get picked up at all. Sometimes it's, commission, but very often it's like, we want this, we're going to show it. And then, so then they're pitching it basically. So
I find it interesting though. And, obviously all of my licensing gigs so far have been small and fairly like a lot of local companies and stuff like that. So obviously it's different than like a Target or something like that. But here, the thing that I think about, and this was really big when I was still writing books, was like a minimum salary for authors, because just like writers, artists work for free and people don't think about that. We work for free and then we try to sell something after it's created. Yeah. Right. So money always comes, we're not paid for the work we're doing. We're paid for the finished product.
Yes.
And so like even with a licensing contract, the one thing I would push back on, Carrie, is just because it's their standard contract doesn't mean you can't negotiate it.
Oh, I have with my attorney. I've tried before. There have been some clients that agree to it, and some of them are like, I understand that your attorney redlined this and you just paid them to do that, but this is the way it is. And then I just have a discussion with myself about whether it's worth it or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I did the same thing with my publishing house, because I was like, you're not changing terms on me. This is going to be different. Like, this is what I want. This is what we're doing. It was like my third book with them. But I do think that, speculative or not, right? If you've signed a contract with that company, at some level, they have held the rights to that while you were in this contract with them, right? That's money lost because you could have pitched it somewhere else. You could have gotten sales. Is that true?
I have non-exclusives.
Oh, okay. Well, that is different. That's
why I have only 2 clients I work with, licensing clients, that are exclusive. All the other ones are non. And otherwise I wouldn't do it, because I'll put it on print on demand. I'll pitch it to everybody.
That is different then. Because I think about opportunity cost in that situation. You know what I'm saying? 100%.
If it was locked down and then I didn't get paid, that would be a different story.
Yeah.
But
and it
I
comes
don't know,
from
Mable, what have you run into? I mean, you license with Target, and I mean, you license with Lucy and Yak, which is one of my dream clients. And I love their products. I love their clothes. But, with your licensing experience, like, do you run into issues where like it's speculative and you may or may not get paid, or you do get paid, or or if you get ghosted or rejected, if you submit something, how does it typically work for you?
I think it all depends on the company. Every company works very differently. And they all license differently as well. I think you got to put it out there that there are different types of licensing, flat fee, royalty, fashion companies like Lucy and Yak is a very short-term collaboration because fashion moves a lot quicker than homeware, for example. So with Lucy and Yak, it was very straightforward and very easy. They saw the design on Instagram and they said they wanted that for pants for that particular project, and they just paid a flat fee. That was the best, easiest thing to go through. With Target, it's a lot of people don't know this, but with Target's a retail store, and a lot of manufacturers actually work with Target to come up with products. So the company that I actually worked with was a manufacturing company that was pitching to Target. And I mean, that was a very up and down process as well. Like a lot of companies actually don't tell you that they've made it to the, like you don't know it until the very last minute that your work is actually going to be installed. Like it took maybe like 6 months for them to tell me like, all right, Target has officially accepted your product. And then it took another 6 months or more than that, like, oh, well, this is the range. I had no idea. Like I was in the dark most of the time. And then a week before the photo shoot, like I didn't even know there was going to be a photo shoot. They said, hey, there's a photo shoot. Can you make it? I'm like, oh, yeah, I can. I will make it. But, it was so last minute for things to happen for Target as well. But so a lot of the time I was confused whether that project was on and off. So Rejection is going to be pending at any moment. Like, I guess I don't really want to scare people, but the reality is Rejection can happen anytime of the process. And it's very up in the air until I walk in the store and I see the product there. So like, when I talk to my friends and they go like, oh yeah, like, what are you working on? It's like, oh yeah, I'm working on with this company to produce this. And they're like, oh, congratulations. I'm like, no, don't congratulate me until you see the product in the store. Right. Because like the plug can be pulled at any point of time. And I've learned to be very cautiously optimistic till that happens.
Yeah.
I guess let me ask you ladies both, like I exist with what I feel is like a tension between the act of creation and then the imperative of this industry, right? And so what I mean by that is like I was going through this kind of existential crisis around my art maybe about a year ago. And which ultimately led me to decide that I was going to stop pitching in 2024, which I have not pitched in 2024. Because when you get into this industry, you hear a lot of design for trends. And I'm not trashing trends. That's not where I'm going with this. What I realized, though, was, especially where we're at right now, a lot of these trends just don't speak to me. And that's fine. So, but it meant in trying to do that, I was creating art that wasn't really true to me. Right. It was like I was doing it because I was supposed, and I'm air quoting for everybody who can't see it, it's like supposed to do it or should. I hate that word. Do it. And then I read a book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And he was talking about how, like, when you create whatever your method of creation is, your goal should be one thing and one thing only: create the best form of it that you can. And then look at what you can do with it. And I was like, you know what, that's where I need to be in this world and with my art. And so once I did that, once I adopted that mindset, then I could create again, because I had gotten to this point where I couldn't create, like nothing was coming. And so, but I still feel like this tension in me, because I'm like, I love what I'm creating now. I create much slower than I used to. I love it. But at the same time, like I recognize right now that a lot of what I'm creating right now probably doesn't have a place in this exact marketplace. Now, things are changing. Maximalism's coming back. Geometrics are, so like that's kind of my jam. That's kind of where I live. So I have a lot more opportunity coming my way. But I think the question that I'm having is like, do y'all have that same tension of like being true to who you are as an artist versus what the marketplace might be demanding?
Yeah, like like no one can see this, but I've been nodding my head the whole time that Toni was talking about. Like, I, it's like I cannot create art that does not resonate with me.
Mhm.
And like for a while, I couldn't make art as well because like, okay, if people want me to make this and that, is like I just couldn't get it out of me. Like I just couldn't draw for the whole of this year and last year. When I started the process again, so I got recently an iPad Pro for myself, and I wanted to teach myself how to draw on the tablet, just because one thing I started developing is pain in my neck, and I can't be at a desktop the whole time. It just hurts too much. So I started drawing on an iPad. That's kind of eased the pain a little bit. And number two, I started loving the process of showing my art on social media. So I love editing videos, by the way. That could be my next creative geek, but whatever it is, I actually like doing reels or putting stuff on YouTube. So anyway, what was my point? Yeah, I started creating again, and the juices are coming, and I'm like, I really miss this. I actually really miss creating art just for fun, not for a client, not for a commission, nothing, not for pitching, just creating. And that's where I just rediscovered that joy of just playing again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for us to realize that this is what our why is. Yes, that's money and blah blah blah, but we create because as kids we just love drawing. That
Right.
brought us
Yeah.
so much joy, and that that's the same with me. Like I needed to rediscover that joy again and forget adulting for a hot minute, because it's painful being rejected, being ghosted, going through all this process. Being an adult sucks because there's all these expectations we have to meet.
Yeah.
Put food on the table, be a good mom, do the laundry, females, all these things we have to do as women. Exercise so we can be healthy. There's all these expectations, right? It drives me crazy on a daily basis how much we have to do.
Yeah. Yep.
So, right now in this space, what brings me joy? What truly brings me joy? Like if I just want to, like I said, sit in front of TV and watch mindless, brainless shows, so be it, because it brings me joy. I'm not going to guilt trip me saying, this is not productive. I could be like doing like something with my time, like read a book. I don't feel like reading a book.
There's something about when I go to create a piece of artwork, and if I sit down to create it and I'm thinking about how I'm going to be able to sell it, or where I'm going to be able to sell it, or who am I going to pitch it to, that ruins all the fun.
Yeah.
And that also makes it even more frustrating and makes me even crankier when I do pitch that art and it gets rejected or I get no response, because I didn't even create that for myself. So then I feel like I wasted my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now when I sit down, I try to create art that I want to create anyway. And if somebody wants to license this or, do a buyout, that's great. But at least, if I get rejected after I create that art, it's okay, because I didn't make it for you. I made it for me.
I think that's really important, because I think that's what gives you like the anchor in it all.
I could be like having this conversation for 2 hours and I wouldn't even know, because it's so much fun, just being this transparent about the whole process. Like I don't want to scare people off art licensing and surface design, but I feel like it's important to like just really have a very honest chat about that too.
Mhm.
And I always tell my students or my followers that there's graphic designers and there's artists, and surface designers are right in between. We're not graphic designers in a sense that, like, I notice there's a difference. If let's say we have if you came from a graphic designer background, briefs and commission work is no problem for them. Like they are okay with like following directions and rejections, and they're just built differently. And then you have the artists who like can't deal with rejections. Like, no, like this is my personal energy and effort and everything. And surface design is like right in between. You kind of have to take both, but you can't, like, you want to create art that you want to see out in the world rather than what other people is telling you to do. Because if that's so, we'd be working in-house as a graphic designer somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
The truth is, like, I can't stand people telling me what to do. That's why I'm a surface designer. I need that freedom of creativity. And if someone just tells me what to draw and what to do, I'm like, I'm out of here.
You have to find the place in yourself where you're creating for you, and then kind of like have that layer of separation, that like psychic distance between then when you try to sell that work of art. All right, Mabel, we have a couple questions. What's your favorite color?
I go through phases. There'll be times where green, for a while, green was my favorite color. And now it's purple. And when I was much younger, it used to be yellow. I always hated orange, but now I can't say I hate it at all. It's not my favorite still, but I don't hate orange now. So I find that question actually very hard to answer.
Surprisingly, every artist I ask, everyone has a hard time saying like exactly what, and you're not the first one to say, well, it's changed over the years.
It's the same thing if you have like 3 kids and someone says, who's one of them is your favorite child? Right? It's like a very difficult question to ask, to answer.
Dogs or cats?
I've seen on Instagram and TikTok how well they get together, but obviously my husband tells me that I'm delusional, that it's not as easy as it looks. But my dream is to have both. I love both cats and dogs.
What is your go-to drawing software?
Adobe Illustrator. Like, I've dabbled with Procreate. I love how easy it is, but there are some things that just drive me nuts about Procreate that I just wish it could be perfect. Yes.
I am like just jumping up and down right now. Yes. Because what happens if you want to make it bigger?
Well, get ready for the update, Carrie. Get ready for the update on Procreate.
Down for a second Cranky episode on Procreate. If anyone
I'm totally down for doing. Do you want to come back? Because I'm all Procreate all day, so like we can totally come back and like we can go back and forth about it for sure.
Yeah, Toni can bitch about Illustrator.
Hate Illustrator. So,
well, Mable, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been wonderful to chat with you. We are so grateful you were able to come and share so honestly, and we would love to have you back anytime.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
If you're loving this podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, we'd love it if you could rate and review us. Your support helps more people discover the show, and it keeps us going strong. Thanks for tuning in. It means a lot. I'm Toni.
And I'm Carrie. It's okay to be cranky.
In the meantime, keep creating.